I wonder if we should first start with Paul giving us a kind of definition of spiritual and gospel and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually a good place to go because they're not the same thing. Uh, Most of us probably know that the true spirituals, came out of work, work songs. The slaves sang these things while they were working, or when they were rejoicing. Um, so you can usually tell the difference by the tempo, by the mood of the piece. You can usually tell the purpose of the spiritual. Now, without going into very much detail about all of that, I'll tell you the most important thing that you should think about when you think about a spiritual is that the text, what they're saying, they have several categories of text. Now, most of the texts sound religious, don't they? Would everybody agree that most spirituals that you hear sound, and
Mhm.
therefore the name spiritual, But they weren't always just singing about Moses and singing about bulrushes and all of that. Some of these songs had words in them that you'll say, what? Where did that come from? I mean, I'll give you an example. Mary had a baby. Yes, Lord. Mary had a baby. Yes, Lord. Mary had a baby. Yes, Lord. The people keep a coming and the train done gone.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with Mary having a baby? So that was a one of those message songs that had a practical purpose during the time of slavery. And it simply means that that wasn't the right time to try to escape. Um, I was thinking about another one the other day that is All My Trials. Has everybody heard that?
Hmm.
All My Trials. Um, that's another one of those message songs. It it just tells you that the underground train is this is not the right time to make your escape. Um,
So,
one
Paul, these messages, these songs were sung as people were working in the fields and stuff, but it was a real time communication signal to the people that were singing the song, as I understand it.
That's right, and it really is handed down like folk music, word of mouth. Everybody, and that's why they change. You'll hear some people sing some words to spirituals that you've never heard before. It's because that's how they got it. They got the words that are different from maybe from what you've heard normally. Um, One quick thing I have to say, I've always thought about this as being miraculous. Think about where these slaves were coming from. Um, they're coming from Africa, we know that, but they're not coming from the same place in Africa. They're taken from different places. And if you know anything about Africa, with 52 nations, and that's just like drawing the broad stroke. I mean, there's so many tribes, so many places, so many languages. And you pluck people out from all these things and you take them somewhere else where they know nothing. And now they come up against a language that is totally foreign. Um, but they somehow master the language enough to to fool the slave owners. Now, I just think that's genius. And to come up with these songs that they could communicate with each other but not give away what was going on. So when you think about the spirituals, I think that's one of the things you should think about. I don't think we should dwell on uh, just the sadness, because I don't. I think about the spirit of the piece. Those who sing with me, they know that we try to get that spirit, and there's some specific things that they do that will get you singing the spiritual. Let me show you a book here. Can you see this?
In their own words.
In their own words. This was written by Eileen Gunter, and these are, oh, but this the subtitle is Slave Life and the Power of Spirituals. And she wrote this, and it's a it's an interesting book because it takes the exact words, and it's words from slaves about what those songs meant to them. I was very fortunate to get this. Um, didn't know this lady, and I met her at a conference, and she handed me a book, and I appreciate that. So there's a lot of enough today. There's a lot of things out there that we can use to inform us about the spiritual. Now, gospel music serves a totally different purpose. That's music for church. You would not have found a slave singing a gospel piece, but the gospel music comes from out of the spiritual, yes, but it's not the same type of music.
And am I correct that you imply that they are in different periods of history?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They're not from the same time period at all. And I I think we're seeing that gospel is probably thriving more than anything any other time right now. So it's a totally different thing. The rhythmic treatments are different than in the spiritual. For instance, the spiritual has syncopations. That means some of the beats don't happen on regular times, they come early. And it's the way we treat that, we wouldn't treat that the same way in gospel music. In the spiritual, we still have to hold to the idea that they're working. So they couldn't change the stress of a beat just because it came early. Now, in classical music, that syncopation means that. It means when you see a syncopation, it means to change the accent of the music, change where the stress comes. Well, in the spiritual, when you do that, it sounds weird. And one second, and I tend to call it incidental. I call those syncopations incidental. They're singing and they just put the note someplace. They don't really plan, I'm going to come early here. I'm going to do something strange here. It's just part of that. Oh, go ahead. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waving at Marita.
Hi,
Oh,
Marita.
Marita. That's it.
I must have Jesus, Lord of my trial. I cannot bear these burdens alone. In my distress, He kindly will help must tell Jesus. I must tell Jesus. Jesus can help me. Jesus alone. Oh, how the world too evil allures me. Oh, how my heart is tempted to sin. I must tell Jesus, and He will help me. Over the world, the victory away. I must tell Jesus. I must tell Jesus. I cannot bear these burdens alone. I must tell Jesus.
Carla,
I must tell Jesus.
we can-
Jesus.
all right. Yeah, that's good. Um, I hope you noticed that the rhythm stays pretty steady in that. And in most spirituals, the spirituals that are up, the tempo is up, they stay that way also. But one, one thing that struck me is that if you go to a black church, they can make a gospel tune out of anything. If you go and you do the opening hymn, plan to sing for about 10 minutes because they'll put it in a feel that, I mean, I'll give you an example. Water fellowship. How long do you think that's going to take if you sing 4 or 5 verses? You know, it's going to take a long time. So they go to that feel and they're singing that. That's a that's something that is carried from the spiritual, but it is not something that you would necessarily do in the spiritual. Any comment or question on that? All right, Vicky.
I remember you talking to us in choir about the rhythm of the work habit and that the song matched the rhythm that they were using to work.
Right, right. It's most spirituals are in two. I know we look in our hymnal and we'll see 4/4, 3/4, and all those things. Most spirituals are in two. So 1, 2, 1, 2. So it's pretty much that way consistently. If you take any spiritual or any spiritual leaning song, it's going to have that feel. And now later on, maybe if we get time, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want us to run out of time, so go ahead.
I have a weird question for you. Um, when I was in college studying music, my music theory teacher told me that I should not sing or teach spirituals to my students because I did not have the same experience as,
A black person.
yes. Anybody else told that? I was.
Yeah.
Well, until I met Paul, I was under that impression that white people couldn't sing them.
Right.
And I
Well,
must say,
Alex Gehring proved that wrong this last Sunday.
well, Paul proved that idea wrong by teaching us how to sing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
We've done a lot of spirituals.
let me see if I can address that this way. For me, music is an experience. So if I only want to experience what I know and keep my world close and
Yeah.
small, then that would make sense. But when I went to school, they taught me a lot of Schubert, a lot of Brahms, Rachmaninoff,
Even Shostakovich.
Shostakovich, right? And so I don't understand how that holds, how that makes any sense. Usually, I think it's because whoever is saying that doesn't really understand how to do it. And it's an interesting thing. They basically do not teach spirituals in college, in school. What they do is, if they're going to do one, they just sing it. They just prepare the parts and just sing it fast and loud. And there's no meaning attached to anything. Yes, go ahead, George.
Um, from experiencing a bit of your contribution to the way we go about the hymns, I'm wondering if the spiritual doesn't have the potential for undermining somebody's worldview.
Oh, very good, George.
Excellent. Excellent. And we have this written down here. Maybe we should just deal with this right now. Deal with that idea right now. It, in the context, and Matt wrote most of these prompts because Matt has known me, 10 years now. He studied with me, and he knows how much I studied classical music, and yet he hears some of this gospel ideas. He told me he hears some of these gospel ideas when I play. The question George just asked leads me to an anecdote that I was going to tell later, but it's perfect now. I went to a church. Vicky's parents lived in a small town in Texas, and we went to church there with them one day. And this fellow came and played, and his playing was very gospel, very gospel. When he was done and service was over, a lot of people were complaining, really complaining, because it wasn't what they were used to. It wasn't the thing they needed. Let me just put it that way. So we went home for lunch, and everybody's talking about it, and I was just sitting there. And Vicky's mom said, "Paul, what do you think?" She said, "You play at this church every now and then when you come, and I've heard you play some of those things in there. How come nobody complains about you?" And I said, "Actually, I know the answer. The answer is I don't give them a steady or dose of that gospel. If it's thrown in, for me it is for a reason. It's not just to play gospel. This is not easy to explain, and I know this is why Matt wanted this discussed. I don't just go there and just start playing gospel, because I know that there are people in the sanctuary who will be disturbed by it. Not because they want to be disturbed, but because they are brought up or they're used to a certain type of presentation. Now, I was brought up that way. That's the interesting thing. I was brought up in that traditional high service way, and I studied classical music. That's what I studied. Another anecdote, very short.
Wait, so are you telling us that you didn't learn gospel or spirituals till you came to the United States?
I didn't learn it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was at my mother's house in New York, and my teacher, who taught me piano in Jamaica, was there, and he said, um, he said, "Show me, show me what they do in gospel music." And I looked at her and said, "What? I don't play gospel." He said, "Yeah, yeah, I know, but you know what they're doing." And so I went to the piano and I started showing him some things, and he sat there watching. When I was done, he said, "See, I knew you knew what was going on there." Now, when I went to New York first, I was 17 years old. My twin and I would go to church and we'd sit there in church, and the music in church was gospel. None of this wonderful pipe organ stuff that you used to hear. There was organ, piano, but it was B3. It was not your high church. And they would play, and so we sat there and we'd listen. We didn't know how to do this thing. We just listened, and every week we'd go and listen to this thing. We didn't have a piano at home. So I think it seeped in somehow. And if you listen to me, most gospel pianists will not say I play gospel, because I don't. Some of it I'll do, but I break it down in a very analytic way to make sure I understand why I like it. Um, I have to tell you, this is very, very difficult to answer, but if I feel like that's going to be too much, I won't do it. So I have to have a feel somehow for the congregation. But I also know that not everybody in the congregation hates that style. But I have to find a middle ground somehow, and I use myself as that uh, judge, because I grew up doing strictly classical. Now, interesting thing is, my twin and I, until we were about 18, no, 23 or so, we were together all the time. He doesn't play the way I do. He is very, very good. He can play very well. But if you heard him, he does not play the way I play the piano. The styling is different. And it's because just that exposure from 23 on, he stayed doing classical music and nothing else. And so he plays with a classical style all the time. George, that didn't satisfy.
Um, what I am thinking is that when you first introduced uh, an alternative rhythm to the hymns, um, I there was a resistance in me uh, out of habit, and but the resistance began to melt, and the imagery that comes to my mind um, uh, was
Joyful, joyful.
no, the imagery comes to my mind. It was first like taking a cough medication that I didn't like, but then I began to feel better, and this is began to think this is good stuff.
But what I appreciate about you, and I have to tell you, everybody, this: George and Suzanne, they send notes. They're excellent note writers. They send notes thanking us and encouraging us all the time. And I know that everything we do is not exactly what they would do, but they take the time to say this. This is the first time I'm hearing this, because he's never mentioned that to me before. Um, but you have to be careful. I know that. You have to be careful how much you do. And but if you do it as a one shot and never again, nobody ever gets to say, well, that was more than interesting. I kind of like it, you know? So I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
Vicky, you have the paper?
Sherman.
Charmin, what are you doing?
Well, I just want to ask you a question going beyond the spirituals and gospel to blues and jazz and now reggae, hip hop.
Hmm.
Um, um, do you see an evolution there that started with spirituals?
Probably not in our society. I mean, you know, it's most prevalent in the United States, yes, but I don't know how. Maybe my imagination is too limited, but I can't really. For me personally, I wouldn't. I don't think I would like it.
I never, I was thinking about this when George was talking about spiritual and the rhythm of that having being disturbing him. That's the way I used to feel about rap
Yeah,
until I watched Hamilton.
yeah, but when we talk about worship, when we talk about worship now, that's a different matter. I
Well,
mean,
I looked it up though. I Googled that and it does seem to, especially reggae, comes out of a spiritual practice, a tradition.
yeah,
Um,
but I am not interested in convincing people. I grew up in that environment. I know where reggae came from. I
yeah.
grew up there, but that grew up with the Rastafarians. That came about because of their religious beliefs. But at the same time, I was going to a totally different church, so my exposure was not to have reggae in church. I wouldn't see how too many people in country club would.
Well, I didn't. I was thinking about what George asked about the worldview, though, and you know, um, us. I think all of us on this call, on this Zoom meeting, are people of a certain age, and you know, the blues and jazz and hip hop and rap speaks to a younger generation. I just, you know, it might be something that expands our worldview, even as even as old folks.
John,
To George's question, uh, everybody knows what a bent wood rocker chair is, right? It's the kind of chair that has a single piece of wood on the bottom that is the rocker.
Yeah.
Uh, the way that you get a straight piece of wood to bend is that you apply pressure persistently in a patient manner. It also helps to have steam and hot water. But that's how you get wood to bend, even strong wood, to bend without breaking. And Paul, my perception of the way that you have introduced, and continue to introduce spiritual and gospel music into our worship service is that persistent, patient pressure to expand the vitality of our service. I so much appreciate it, and I really value your statement that you are a thermometer. You are judging how much pressure the congregation can stand on a given Sunday morning in terms of being introduced to uh, new musical experiences.
now George wants to say something, but let me just say this. How should I say this? I'm not really interested in finding something that the whole congregation will agree to, because I know I won't find that. But if if there are people there who will, if the experience will be aided by some people hearing some things, I'll do it. But the truth is, folks, I have to be comfortable with it. I am not gonna do it no matter how people beg, do this, do that. I'm not gonna do it. I'll find some excuse not to do it. But if if I can, if I'm playing something and it moves me in a spiritual way, that's how I worship, with the music. That's the majority of my worship. And if I can't do that, 900 people can be in the building and crying for it. I don't think I would even try. George, you were going to say something.
Well, I, I like John's metaphor about the bending of the wood. Um, and you are a master at bending of the wood. But I think you are saying that you are, I would say you are effective at it because you love the wood.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Well, that is true in any teaching situation, isn't it? The more the teacher loves the subject, the more the kids can be enthusiastic too because they catch it from them. But I was going to ask this, it's on Matt's list, so I thought I'd throw it in. Um, you, we're all speaking as if bringing in things that we were not used to. We're speaking as if it is something that is good for us and something that we should do. But I would like to ask the question if that is actually needed. Should we have a different view of what should be done in church? And here's the question that made me think this way. How has it influenced your choices of literature as a conductor for the choir? Because it is hard to get music that the that everybody in the choir likes. But,
Right. Right. I do have to give the choir credit because very rarely will someone come up to me and say, I hate that. Very rarely will I ever hear that.
they might think it, but
They may think it, but they will go along and try it. And eventually a lot of them will come and say, I really like that. But the only way to judge a choir, you can't judge whether they like the music or not at the beginning because they have to. I used to say this to my students at KU. The toughest thing to do is to choose literature. And the reason is you're going to rehearse and learn your music until you just love it and it's just so great. But stop and think. The audience gets one shot to like it or not. So if you don't think you can make that come across, if you don't think you can help them see the beauty in the music, maybe you're better off doing something else and finding a different audience. Um, I think that holds true for church because what's the purpose of disturbing the mood if you haven't added anything? And that's how I think. I was telling Carla, I was telling you this today. Um, I worship with music. That's how I worship. Um, and I'll go off and I'll say things like, I don't need to hear any more sermons. Um, and it's over the top of obviously what I'm saying, but the truth is, I probably wouldn't care if there was music. I don't know if that's too harsh to say. And Carla said, I think there are people in the church who probably feel that way. They they come for the music too. So I don't know that there's a fact. I don't poll people on this, but I just know that I was always at church every week when I was growing up, and I know why I was there. And then I got something more because I was there. But the music was the thing that pulled me in and held me there and kept me there. So I'm in no mood or in no haste to force anything down anybody's throat and say, you must enjoy this, you must enjoy this. I'm just doing what I think the music is is asking and what others may be willing to accept at the moment.
But if you don't give variety, if you don't introduce something new and different once in a while, how will we ever know if we like it or not? I mean, to answer the question that was asked, I think that you bring in different things, maybe not all the time, forcing it on everybody, but once in a while, learning a new hymn, learning this, because how did we learn the hymns in the first place? They had to be new to us at one point in time.
I also think there's a danger in assuming that everyone who's in worship has the same background and is expecting the same things. We are a very eclectic group of people, and so what appeals to, some of us may not appeal to the rest of us, and that's a tough sell when, you're bringing in people and trying to welcome new members of the congregation. You just have to follow your heart.
Right.
I agree with that, Joyce. Even further, I want to expand on that. I think if we don't try new things and listen to new things, again, going back to what George said about our worldview, the quote from Carla's sermon from Dr. Coleman, that, peace and grace are what help us to see the world less narrowly than we might have otherwise seen it. And I think trying new things and hearing new ideas, thinking outside the box, singing outside the box, helps us do that. It doesn't have to be a steady appetite, but if we try new things with love, I think that's everything. Especially in.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I've really appreciated about the online worship is that you've worked so hard in incorporating the elements of the different services all in one.
Yeah.
Because that is a familiar thing that's comfortable when everything around us has changed and changed very dramatically and very quickly. But every Sunday when you can come back and you know that there's going to be a hymn, and you know there's going to be the trio, and you know there's going to be some kind of special music, it's just kind of going, okay, we're grounded, we're okay.
Well put.
Do you have any favorite gospel or spiritual?
I don't. That's the easiest answer I can give you. I really don't. One thing I have to tell you is that spirituals are being arranged today so that it's hard to recognize them as spirituals. We know that spirituals come out of work and praise from slave times, but they're arranged in such sophisticated ways now that I wonder if you can really call them spirituals. But if the spirit is there, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. That means it has to reach me someplace. It cannot sound contrived, like I'm gonna do an arrangement now. And the song is there resisting you and saying, don't touch me, don't touch me. And I'm not putting you out, I'm putting you out. No. So I can't truthfully say that I can point to a spiritual or a gospel piece that, but then I can't point to a classical piece that's my favorite either. So I don't I don't live that way. I don't. I mean, you could move from one piece to the next, and I could say, "Oh yes, yes, my long lost Schubert." You know, it just happens to be that way with me. I don't know that it's that way with anybody else, but I don't really have favorites. They're my kids. Go ahead.
Um, well,
Paul, do you want to play part of the chamber singers piece or not?
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
Just a little bit of it.
Yes, yes.
See if this works. Well. You hear it?
Yeah. Yes, it's hard to hear that over the Zoom, isn't it? It's hard because it gets distorted and everything. Any question at this point? We're gonna try to get this thing done in a reasonable time.
I have one last question from me. Um, why do you think it's important? I guess you've kind of answered this, but why is it important to our spiritual experience to incorporate gospel and spirituals in our church services?
Well, if you ask me that, I'm going to answer it for any type of music. We need to experience the meaning and how it's put forward in from a different culture. Um, One of the things that I dislike, and I disliked it when I was teaching at KU, I still dislike it, is that people would invite me in to do workshops, clinics, and I'd go in and they'd hand me the spiritual. And, can you do the spiritual for us, please? Now they're saying two things, one good, one bad. They're saying, I don't know enough about the spiritual to do it myself. I want to learn something about this. But the other one thing is that you're black. You can do the spiritual, can't you?
Yeah.
Um, so, and then I would sometimes say, depending on how close I am to the teacher, I'll say, I do Brahms too, because for some reason they think that's your thing. That's your thing, that you're going to do that. Um, I think it's meaningful because if it can raise the spirit. When Alex sang this weekend, right? Um, Alex didn't do anything physically dramatic. He sang a powerful song, and he did it in a powerful way.
Mhm.
And
Amen.
to me, to me, that is what it's all about. It
Yeah.
doesn't leave you wondering, what was that? You know what that was. You're either dead or it made sense to you. You know, uh, I think that's the important thing for me for church music is that it takes us someplace higher. Um,
Absolutely. It opens the heart.
yeah, and there are three main elements in music: melody, harmony, and rhythm. And different types of music emphasize um, different parts of those elements. I don't think it would be a shock to say to you that the gospel music relies a lot on the rhythmic. I think everybody would agree that's true. It also relies a lot on the harmonic. Now the melody's there, but it's the harmonic and the things that are changing. So when I listened to gospel music earlier in my life, that's what I heard that was changing. And this is where I agree. I wish I had a piano that could play through this, but it would be distorted. I played a concerto by Brahms when I was younger, and it got to a section. I was learning this section of the piece, and I could show it better than I can explain it. And I wish Matt had been here or some of my students from school because I'll go to the piano and I'll play what they're supposed to be singing, and I say, "That's what you wanted," and I'll put it in sort of in a jazz. Well, the singers I work with here at Country Club know this is true, and I'll play it. I'll change it up and I'll play it a certain way, and I say, "That's the spirit of what he wanted right
That's what he
there."
meant to do.
Yeah, it's what he meant to do, to do this, and or I'll say something like, "Oh, you didn't know that Schubert went to the black church in Germany, huh?" And it makes you start looking at this music as this universal thing that
Yeah.
everybody can share part of it. And for me, that is the critical thing about reaching people where they are, and then giving others a chance to see, oh, so that's how that works. But you can't force it down their throats. It doesn't work that way. I'm not going to ever tell anybody that the way I think about music is better than anyone else. But I have the feeling that if I like it, somebody else will like it too. And George and George and Suzanne remind me of when I was growing up because I remember this week when I told you that they've never said a negative word about the music that I've been involved in. Is this true? I read every single one of their letters. Um, when I was growing up, I did stupid things in church. I didn't know the boundaries. I wanted to do something, I did it. And it was a lot of times wrong. I mean, absolutely wrong. It should not have happened in church. But those old people, man, those people I grew up with, like my parents' age and stuff, they would just, they wouldn't curse us. They'd say, they're young, they'll learn. And it took me a long time to figure out what they were saying. Why are we going to beat them up over this? They made a mistake. They don't know. They'll learn. And as I got older, I thought, that's what they were saying. It's not appropriate, but you have to get there on your own. Um, Sorry. Any more questions?
No, Paul, I do want to say that Scott and I are really, really, really impressed with the quality of the broadcast on Sunday morning. And I've been a part of some Zoom meetings with choir directors across the country who apologize for not doing everything live online. And I said, why on earth would you do that?
Hmm.
I mean, the way that you all put this together, and I know Matt spends most of his life doing this, I think. The product that you come across with is very impressive. And there are churches across the country that are now watching how you all do this so they can learn from you all.
Before we go, sorry.
I was going to say I come from a background in broadcasting, and I'm sure many of you have heard me say that our Sunday morning streaming video is as good as any professionally produced broadcast that you're going to see, period.
Yep. The new microphones help a lot.
Yes, they do. They do. Before we got on this, I was talking to Matt. He's not in town right now, but he's working on this week's. And before I say anything, I mean, I can't take credit for this stuff. When he runs things by me, I just say what I think, and he's usually on top of it. But I've known him a while, I told you, and he will work himself to death. So we're trying to figure out a way now to share the load with the technology, with the editing, but he works so hard. I don't know if he's in Utah right now, but he's somewhere, and he's trying to figure out how to get files back here because they're large files, and they take a long time to get them back here so that they can be placed in the service this week. Um, it's always good to let him know that it's appreciated because he works hard at it, and I know. Yes, Marita.
My only question is, what is it going to be like when we go back to everybody meeting together Sunday morning and we don't have this professional production? That thought has crossed my mind a couple of times.
We've talked about that. We've talked about that, and I think in a way, the broadcast will help us step our game up a little bit. You know, as far as making Sunday morning together a little bit more, I don't want to say professional, but a little bit more thought out, and better executed. Because the truth is, nobody wants to go back to, "Oh, why did we do that? Why did you do that?" We want to make sure things are, you know, the thing
And
that the
if
thing
you
that
want
is
to make,
impressive. Go
we
ahead.
don't go too far that direction. We came from a church where it was almost like production was more important than the worship service, and everything had to be planned out to the last second, and it was uncomfortable after a while.
Right, right, right. There are some things that I'm sure you're going to notice, and when we come back, we're going to say, "Huh, I wish we still had that." And so we'll see how that influences what we do, because you see those kids get up there and read the scripture, and we just sit there looking at these little girls get up there. They're so well, nicely dressed in bows, and Mickey and I say, look at how cute she is, you know. But sometimes when you're in the back of the church, you can't see that. You can't see how nice these kids look, you know. There's I probably shouldn't spill the beans, but um, we've been using a prompter for
I
the
could tell.
sermon.
Yeah,
I could
You
tell.
could tell
Yeah.
because they're looking at you.
Yes.
They're looking at you. They're not. Okay.
They're
And
not looking.
many of them, many resisted in the beginning. You know, no, I don't like that. I don't. And then
It's effective.
I remember when Carla said, "I like it. I'm doing it," and then more people started trying it. Alex was using the prompter when he sang. Yeah, Sarah was using it when she sang the other day, and I can't even see the prompter. Uh,
You don't even use the music.
Yeah.
Oh,
so those are things that you're gonna wonder why is it not as clean as when we were on broadcast because people will be holding things like this unless you know something else happens. Well, who knows?
one of the things I've really enjoyed is how you've varied the music using Russell and Elizabeth and DePring. Um, I've just really appreciated the variety of the music that you use, the string duo, and it's been lovely. It's been
We,
lovely.
we have talent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the drone looking down on the piano.
The steady drone. I don't give them any ideas. Alex has a drone with a great camera on it, but he just said, I don't think we'll get away with it. If we...
Well, I certainly noticed the first time that I think Sherry was playing, and the camera shot was above, looking at the keyboard, and I'm thinking, oh, that's new.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't a drone because it was too steady.
No,
But
it wasn't true. I think there's one performance where the camera was looking down on my hand too.
More
And
than one.
when Matt played with Cherie, yeah, the camera
That
was
was
looking
cool.
down. Yeah, so it teases you. You know, you have to come up with things, but I'll tell you, it's mostly Matt.
well, I will also congratulate Laura Shop and Leslie Tinjack because their still photos are
Oh,
every week a creative way to look at something that we've all seen thousands of times, but a different perspective that inspires a better understanding. I pointed out to Shelley during one of the Sunday mornings, I said, so we're looking at a window and where is it? And Shelley didn't recognize it because how many of us have really looked at the smaller parts of the St. Cecilia window or the windows in the back of the sanctuary or in the little foyers on either side? And I find that helpful and inspiring. And so I am just delighted with our technical response. And by the way, the messages. So Paul, your question earlier and also George's about change. I am so excited to be a part of a congregation that is embracing change as we move into a future where 1950s church isn't going to work, and we know it. And we are, I think, in a very healthy way, looking to embrace the changes that are upon us and becoming more relevant to the world around us. I have never been so excited to be a part of this congregation.
Good. Carla? I think
Ready to wrap it up?
I think so, unless
Right.
somebody has something else.
Good to see all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Carla.
Thank you,
Thank
Carl.
you,
Thank you,
folks.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Stay safe. Good night.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
did.
Bye.
Marie?